She married a Korean man in secret. His mother's reaction changed everything. The envelope arrived on a Tuesday. Chidinma's hands trembled as she held it, thick, cream-colored paper with Korean characters she couldn't read. But she recognized the return address. Busan, his mother's house. 6 months. 6 months since the secret wedding. 6 months of living in Seoul like a ghost in her own marriage, and now this. "Don't open it," Yoon said from the doorway, his voice flat. But she already had. Inside was a single photograph. Their wedding day, the one they thought no one knew about. Someone had been watching. Someone had followed them to that tiny courthouse in Incheon. And written across the bottom in red ink, "Family meeting, this Sunday, both of you." The woman who knew too much. 3 days earlier, Chidinma had made a mistake. She was at the Gangnam Express bus terminal, buying a ticket to Daegu for a work conference. The woman at the counter next to her kept staring, not the usual curious stares she got as a black woman in Korea, but something else. Recognition. "Excuse me," the woman said in Korean, then switched to English. "You're Yiwon's friend." Chidinma's blood went cold. The woman was elderly, designer handbag, pearl earrings, the kind of put together that screamed old Korean money. Yes, how do you?" "I'm Mrs. Kang. I play baduk with Yiwon's mother every Thursday." The woman smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. She talks about her son often, about how he's still unmarried, how worried she is. The word unmarried hung between them like a blade. "I see," Chidinma managed. "It's interesting," Mrs. Kang continued, adjusting her handbag. "Last month I was at the Incheon district office. My daughter needed documents, and I could have sworn I saw someone who looked exactly like you, coming out of the marriage registration office, with someone who looked exactly like Yiwon." Chidinma felt her knees weaken. But that couldn't be right, could it? Because his mother would know if her only son got married. Mrs. Kang leaned closer. The pleasant mask dropped. Wouldn't she? She walked away before Chidinma could respond. That was Monday. The photograph arrived Tuesday. Now it was Sunday, and they were driving to Busan. The House of Silence. Yiwon's mother lived in a hanok that had been in their family for 4 generations. Traditional Korean architecture with modern renovations, exposed wooden beams, heated floors, a garden with a koi pond that probably cost more than Chidinma's entire education. Mrs. Yoon answered the door herself. No greeting, no expression. "Tea is ready," she said in Korean, not looking at Chidinma. The living room was arranged like a courtroom. Mrs. Yoon sat on one side of the low table, 2 empty cushions across from her, between them the photograph, face up, accusatory. But there was something else, a folder, brown, unmarked, thick with papers. "Sit," Mrs. Yoon commanded. Yiwon started to speak, but his mother raised one hand. Silence. She opened the folder slowly, deliberately, pulled out the first document. "Chidinma Okafor," she read. "Born in Enugu, Nigeria. Moved to Lagos at age 7 after your father." She paused, looked up. "After he abandoned your family." Chidinma's heart stopped. How did she? "University of Lagos. Graduated top of your class. Master's degree in international business from Yonsei University." Another document. "Currently working at Hyundai Motors Marketing Division. Salary, 65 million won per year." Mrs. Yoon spread the papers across the table like cards. Bank statements, academic records, even a copy of Chidinma's father's death certificate from 2 years ago. "I've known about you for 8 months, Mrs. Yoon said, her voice terrifyingly calm. "Since before you married my son." "Wait, what?" Yiwon's face had gone white. "Iyama, how?" "Did you think I'm stupid?" For the first time, emotion cracked through, not anger, something sharper. "Did you think a mother doesn't notice when her son stops calling as often, when he starts lying about why he can't come home for Chuseok?" She pulled out another photograph. Yiwon and Chidinma at a cafe in Itaewon holding hands. The date stamp, 10 months ago. "I hired an investigator the day you told me you were too busy to attend your cousin's wedding." Mrs. Yoon's hands were shaking now. "The same day I saw charges on your credit card from a jewelry store for an engagement ring you never showed me." The room spun. Chidinma grabbed the edge of the table. "So I learned everything," Mrs. Yoon continued. "Where she's from, who her family is, what her prospects are." She gathered the papers slowly, methodically. "And then I watched you two sneak around like criminals, like I was the enemy." Tears were running down her face now, but her voice stayed steady. "You made me the villain in your love story, without ever giving me a chance to be anything else." The truth she'd been hiding. "There's something else you should know," Mrs. Yoon said quietly. She stood, walked to a cabinet, and pulled out an old photo album, the kind with yellowed pages and black and white photographs. "This is my mother." She pointed to a young woman in a 1960s hanbok. "And this is the man she loved." The man was white, American maybe, military uniform. He was stationed at Camp Carroll. She met him when she was working at a restaurant in Daegu. He wanted to marry her. She wanted to marry him. Mrs. Yoon's finger traced the photo. "But my grandparents said no, because he was foreign, because of what people would say." She turned the page. Her mother, older now, standing next to a Korean man in a suit. Wedding photo. The smile didn't reach her eyes. "She married the man they chose, my father. A good man, a kind man. And she spent 40 years wondering about the choice she never got to make." Mrs. Yoon closed the album. "She died 5 years ago. One of the last things she said to me was, 'Don't let fear make your children's choices for them.'" The silence stretched. "So when I found out about you," Mrs. Yoon looked directly at Chidinma for the first time, "I was terrified. Not because you're black, not because you're not Korean, but because I knew exactly what everyone would say, exactly how they would judge, and I didn't know if I was strong enough to stand against it." She sat back down, suddenly looking exhausted. "I spent 8 months gathering information like ammunition, preparing myself for battle, building a case for why you might be acceptable." She laughed bitterly. "As if your worth needed defending, as if love required a legal brief." Chidinma found her voice. "Why didn't you say anything?" "Because I'm a coward," Mrs. Yoon's voice broke. "I told myself I was being careful, being thorough, but really I was just scared. Scared of my friends' opinions, scared of family gossip, scared of being the mother who couldn't control her son." She pushed the folder across the table. "And then Mrs. Kang called me, told me she saw you, said she was going to tell everyone at the baduk club, said I should be prepared for the embarrassment." Mrs. Yoon's jaw tightened. "That's when I realized I'd rather be embarrassed than become my mother, sitting in regret, wondering what if." "The photograph. I sent you that picture," Mrs. Yoon admitted. "I had someone take it that day. I had you followed. I know everything." Yi-won stood up abruptly. "That's insane, Iyama. You violated our privacy, you." "Yes," she didn't flinch. "I did, and I'll have to live with that, but at least I'll live with the truth." She looked at Chidinma again. Really looked, like she was seeing her for the first time. "Tell me," Mrs. Yoon said, "why do you love my son?" The question caught Chidinma off guard. Not do you love him, but why? She struggled. How do you explain love to someone who's treating it like a business negotiation? "The truth," Mrs. Yoon pressed. "Not the romantic version, the real reason." Chidinma took a breath. "He makes me feel seen, not as a foreigner, not as different, just as me. He learned to cook jollof rice even though he hates spicy food because he wanted to understand something I loved. He calls my mother in Nigeria every Sunday. She doesn't speak English well and he doesn't speak Igbo, but they still talk for an hour about nothing." Her voice cracked. "He wore a mask at our secret wedding because he was afraid someone would recognize him. And I watched him cry after because he wanted to give me a real celebration, with family, with joy. He wanted me to have everything, and instead I got a courthouse," Mrs. Yoon finished, "and a hidden ring." Chidinma nodded, unable to speak. Mrs. Yoon stood, walked around the table, and did something neither of them expected. She knelt in front of Chidinma. In Korean culture, elders don't kneel to younger people, ever. "I'm sorry," she said. "I'm sorry I made you hide. I'm sorry I made my son choose between his mother and his wife. I'm sorry I spent 8 months investigating you when I should have spent 8 months getting to know you." She pulled something from her pocket, a small jewelry box. This was my mother's. She never got to give it to the daughter-in-law she wanted, but she would have wanted you to have it. Inside was a simple jade ring. Old, worn, beautiful. It's not an apology. You can't buy forgiveness, but it's a beginning if you'll let it be. 3 months later, the Baduk Club met every Thursday at the community center in Busan. Mrs. Yoon arrived early as always, but this time she wasn't alone. "Everyone," she announced as the elderly women gathered, their curious eyes already fixed on Chidinma. "This is my daughter-in-law, Chidinma. She's learning baduk, and I thought she could observe today." Mrs. Kang's teacup froze halfway to her lips. "Your daughter-in-law?" "Yes." Mrs. Yoon's voice was steel wrapped in silk. "We had the family ceremony last month. It was beautiful. I wore my mother's hanbok, and Chidinma wore a traditional Nigerian jewel that was absolutely stunning." She pulled out her phone, showing photos before anyone could respond. The wedding, a real one this time. Both families, both cultures. Yi-won in a hanbok, Chidinma in an iro and buba, then both of them changing outfits halfway through because why choose when you can celebrate everything? "They married twice, actually," Mrs. Yoon continued, her tone conversational but her eyes sharp. "Once last year privately, and once last month with family, because I was too afraid to accept her the first time, and I won't make that mistake again." The silence was deafening. Mrs. Kang set down her cup. "I see." "Do you?" Mrs. Yoon leaned forward slightly. "Because when you called me 3 months ago, you said I should be prepared for embarrassment. But I'm not embarrassed. I'm proud. My son married a brilliant, kind, successful woman who makes him happier than I've ever seen him. The only embarrassment would be if I let people like you tell me that's somehow shameful." She stood, helped Chidinma up. "Now, shall we play? Or does anyone else have opinions about my family they'd like to share first?" No one said a word. As they set up the baduk board, Mrs. Kang cleared her throat. "The wedding photos were lovely." It wasn't an apology, but it was a crack. "Thank you," Chidinma said quietly. "Your granddaughter was one of my bridesmaids. She's very talented." Mrs. Kang blinked. "My Sumin." "Yes, she's in my mentorship program at Hyundai. Brilliant engineer. She's the one who actually introduced me to Yi-won at the company dinner 3 years ago." Chidinma smiled. "Small world, isn't it?" The color drained from Mrs. Kang's face as she realized her granddaughter had been facilitating this relationship all along. Mrs. Yoon placed the first stone on the board. "Small world indeed. Now, let's play." 6 months after that, the envelope arrived on a Tuesday. But this time, Chidinma recognized the handwriting immediately. Her own mother, from Lagos. Inside was a letter and a photograph. The photo showed Mrs. Yoon in Nigeria, standing in front of Chidinma's childhood home, wearing a bright Ankara dress and surrounded by Chidinma's entire extended family. She was laughing, holding a baby cousin, looking completely at ease. The letter was simple. "Your mother-in-law visited for 2 weeks. She learned to make egusi soup, terribly. She danced at the market. She argued with your Aunt Ngozi about the best way to season goat meat. She cried at your father's grave and said prayers I didn't understand but felt anyway. She asked me about you as a child, about your dreams, about the day you told me you were moving to Korea. She wanted to know the daughter I raised, not just the woman her son married. I told her the truth. I was terrified when you married him. Terrified you'd lose yourself trying to fit into a culture that didn't want you. Terrified his family would break your spirit. But she said something that changed my mind. She said, I already lost 8 months being afraid. I won't lose any more time to fear. Our children chose each other. Our job is to choose them back. So I'm choosing, my daughter. I'm choosing to trust your choice. I'm choosing to see her not as the mother-in-law who rejected you, but as the woman who had the courage to change. Bring her back to visit soon, and bring my son-in-law. Your Aunt Ngozi wants to teach him the proper way to pound yam. With love, Mama. Chidinma looked up at Yiwon. tears streaming down her face. My mother and your mother took a trip together. Apparently, he said, showing his phone. And my mother just texted. She's learning Ibo on Duolingo, says she wants to be able to talk to your family properly next time. Next time, not if, when. The secret wedding felt like a lifetime ago. The hidden ring, the fear. The choosing between love and family. All of it transformed into something she never thought possible. Not just acceptance, but belonging. 1 year later, the call. Chidinma stood in the bathroom, staring at 2 pink lines. When she came out, Yoon knew immediately. Are you? She nodded. They called Mrs. Yoon first. She screamed so loud they had to pull the phone away from their ears. Then she said something that made them both cry. I'm going to be the best grandmother in 2 countries. 3, if we count all the places this baby will call home. That evening, Chidinma recorded a video message. Not for YouTube, not for social media, just for her child for someday. Your grandmother spent 8 months investigating me like a spy, she said to the camera, laughing through tears. She hired detectives, gathered bank statements, built a case file like I was on trial. And you know what? I'm glad she did. Yiwon looked confused. You are. Because it means she cared enough to be terrified. She cared enough to fight her own fear. She cared enough to change. Chidinma touched her stomach. This baby will grow up knowing both halves of their heritage aren't divided, they're doubled. They'll have a grandmother who learned to be brave and another grandmother who taught her how. She turned off the camera. That's your story, Yiwon said softly. His mother's reaction changed everything. No, Chidinma corrected. Her choice changed everything. Reaction is instant, choice is daily, and she chooses us every single day. The secret wasn't the wedding. The secret was that love isn't the hard part. It's choosing love, every day, even when it's terrifying, especially then. If you've ever loved across borders, across cultures, across the lines people draw to keep us apart, you know this truth. The people who matter will choose to grow, or they'll choose to lose you. Mrs. Yoon chose to grow. And in doing so, she didn't just gain a daughter-in-law. She gained a bigger heart, a wider world, and proof that it's never too late to become the person your fear kept you from being. What will you choose?